My mother asked me to hide my pregnancy, and later, my newborn, so my sister's wedding would get all the attention. I refused. Months after that conversation, she did something far worse, but this is where it began. I was 31, living with my husband, Eli, on the east side of Portland. Our apartment is small. A narrow kitchen, a couch by the window, a list of baby items taped to the fridge. 2 years earlier, my father, Javier, died. In the hospital, he asked me to take care of my mother because, he said, Tessa, my younger sister, wasn't ready for real responsibility. I promised him. I believed taking care meant rides, calls, and showing up on holidays. I didn't know it would be used to ask me to disappear from my own life. When Tessa got engaged, I was 6 months pregnant. Her date was set for December. Anyone could see I would already be a mother by then. 2 weeks after the engagement party, my mother came over without calling. It was raining. A pot of chicken soup was on low. She put her purse on the counter and spoke in a steady, careful tone, as if the decision had already been made somewhere else. She said I shouldn't post about the pregnancy, shouldn't tell extended family, and after the birth, shouldn't bring the baby around until the wedding was finished. "This is Tessa's moment," she said. "Don't steal focus." I told her I wasn't invited to the wedding and wouldn't be there. Tessa and I are not close. There would be no scene. My mother said I was being dramatic and making everything about myself. I looked at the steam from the pot and at the round of my stomach under my sweater and told her this wasn't about me. It was about a child who deserved to be acknowledged from the first day. She tried to make the request sound smaller. "Only 30 days, she said. "Not forever." I answered that the first day mattered. Eli stepped in from the hallway with a dish towel in his hands. She asked him to talk sense into me. He said we would not hide our son. My mother's mouth tightened. She told me not to expect her at the hospital if I kept pushing this. I said I would remember she said that. She waited for me to change my answer. I didn't. She lifted her purse and left. The latch clicked. The apartment went very quiet. I opened the window a little and stirred the soup. Then I sat at the table and looked at our list. Diapers, wipes, a small lamp for night feedings, and felt for the first time that the list was more than shopping. It was a plan, and it was mine. That night, I thought about my father's request. I decided taking care meant showing up, telling the truth, and keeping reasonable boundaries. It did not mean hiding a baby so someone else could have a neat program and perfect photographs. I texted my mother one line, "We will share news on our terms." I saved the thread. She replied almost at once, "Don't you dare ruin this." Labor began on a Thursday while I folded laundry. At the hospital, the monitors beeped and the nurse spoke in a calm voice. Eli called my mother from the hallway. She said she was at a venue walkthrough with Tessa and couldn't come. I focused on breathing. Our son was born at 2:12 a.m. We named him Mateo Javier. Eli cried. I did too. The next afternoon, my mother texted, "How are you? Busy with rehearsal dinner issues. We'll visit soon." I didn't answer. We took Mateo home and learned the rhythm every new parent learns: feeding, laundry, short sleep, and checking his small breaths in the dark. Before I went to bed that night, I repeated the boundary out loud so I wouldn't drift from it later. I would not pretend my son didn't exist for a dress, a seating chart, or a schedule. Whatever was coming, this part was decided. The first week at home settled into a clear pattern. Feedings every 3 hours, short naps in the afternoon, laundry cycling more than once a day. Eli learned the swaddle that actually stayed put. I learned how to sleep in pieces and still feel awake enough to hold our son safely. At night, I kept one lamp low and watched Mateo's chest rise and fall. When doubt crept in, I repeated the boundary I had set. We would share news on our terms, and we would not hide our child. My mother did not visit. Instead, the family chat filled with dress fittings, seating charts, and florist delays. I muted the thread. Eli's parents, Min and Howard, came by with groceries and quiet help. Min showed me how to sit so stitches hurt less and how to burp a sleepy baby without waking him fully. Howard checked the smoke alarms and installed the car seat with careful hands. They asked what we needed, and then listened to the answers. One afternoon, Min placed a container of soup on the counter and said, "You are doing well, even when it doesn't feel like it." I nodded because I didn't trust my voice. Eli smiled and said, "We're okay. We're just new." It was the first time anyone had named it that way, and it fit. I kept records without making a ceremony out of it. I saved my mother's messages and my replies. I scanned the discharge papers and Mateo's birth certificate and put them in a folder on the desktop. Boundaries are easier to hold when you can point to something. Every night, before I put the laptop away, I skimmed the folder and felt steadier. On day 8, we texted a short announcement to our closest friends. Mateo's name, his time of birth, and one photo where he was yawning so hard his eyes disappeared. I didn't post it publicly. I didn't send it to the family chat. The people who showed up for us first were the ones who received it first. It felt fair. When the apartment grew too quiet, Eli and I walked Mateo around the block. The air smelled like wet concrete and coffee. A neighbor I barely knew lifted a hand and said, "Congratulations," and nothing else. I liked that. Back upstairs, I placed the congratulation card we had received from a coworker on the bookshelf, next to a framed photo of my father. The shelf looked balanced again. I tried my mother once, just to see if there was a way forward. I wrote, "If you want to meet Mateo, we can set a time next week. No surprises, please." There was no answer that day or the next. When she finally wrote back, it was a single line. "Tessa's final tasting moved to Thursday. Can't commit." I read the message twice and let the phone go dark. 2 weeks in, the nights started to stretch. Mateo gave us 4 hours in a row, then 5. Eli and I took turns sleeping and learned each other's rhythms again. On Sunday afternoon, I stood at the sink and felt, for the first time since labor, that my head and my body belonged to the same person. I wanted to keep that feeling. On Tuesday, just after Mateo fell asleep against my shoulder, my phone lit with my mother's name. I watched it ring once, twice, and answered, because ignoring her forever wasn't the point. Her voice was tight and fast. "Nora, you have to help me," she said. "I'm in trouble. They're going to serve me papers." I shifted Mateo higher and asked, as evenly as I could, "Who is going to serve you?" She took a breath and said, "The adoption agency." She didn't say hello. "Nora, you have to help me," my mother blurted. "I went to an agency to handle a situation and now they're saying I committed fraud. They're going to serve me papers." I kept my voice steady. "What situation?" A pause, then, "The baby." She rushed on, as if speed could soften it. "I told them I had power of attorney for you and Eli, that a court found you unfit for now, and that I was the temporary custodian. I started an adoption, only temporary, so Tessa's wedding wouldn't be overshadowed. I thought we could fix the paperwork after my mouth went dry." Mateo stirred against my shoulder and settled again. "You told strangers that Eli and I are unfit," I said, "and that you can make decisions for our son. I used the wrong template, she said. The clerk kept asking for judges' names and case numbers. I panicked. If you call and explain, they'll drop it. You promised your father you'd take care of me. Taking care, I thought, is not covering for this. I won't call to excuse lies, I said. Do not come over. Do not contact Eli. If anyone reaches out, we will tell the truth. She started to cry, the hard kind that leaves no space for answers. I did it for your sister. Everything is set. People will notice if attention goes elsewhere. People noticed when you didn't come to the hospital, I said. We'll handle this with the agency. I ended the call before my resolve thinned. I texted Eli, please come home if you can. Mom tried to start an adoption using fake documents. He called immediately. Are you safe? He asked. We're okay, I said. Mateo's sleeping. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again from an unknown number. A woman introduced herself as a caseworker from the agency. Her voice was calm and exact. She asked to confirm our names, Mateo's birth date, and whether either of us had ever been under a court order or treatment program. No, I said. Never. We flagged the file, she said. No placement has been initiated. The documents provided to us appear fraudulent. We'll need copies of your IDs and the birth certificate, and any communication from the relative. I'll send everything today, I said. Thank you for calling. When the line went quiet, I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Mateo, Legal. I saved the call log, my mother's messages, and a brief note of what she'd said while it was still sharp. Boundaries need records. Eli came through the door sooner than I expected, tie loose, face set. I handed him the phone, and he listened to my summary without interrupting. We'll speak to a lawyer today, he said. We sat at the table, Mateo between us in his bassinet, and made a short list. Scan documents. Send them to the caseworker. Ask for attorney referrals. Tell Min and Howard the basics. I wrote to the caseworker with scans of our IDs and Mateo's certificate, then added one line at the end. We will cooperate fully and are prepared to give a statement. Her reply arrived within minutes, acknowledging receipt and offering to connect us with the city attorney's office if needed. My phone buzzed again. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. A text followed. I'm under restrictions now. Humiliating. If you explain it was a misunderstanding, they'll be lenient. Think of family. I saved it without answering. I stood, lifted Mateo, and felt his weight settle against me. We'll keep this simple, I said to Eli. We tell the truth to every person who asks. We document everything, and we don't move the line to make anyone comfortable. He nodded. I'll start calling for a lawyer. While he dialed, I pressed my cheek to Mateo's hair and let my breathing match his. I had been afraid that the next step would feel like a fight. It felt like maintenance. Protect the child, protect the record, protect the boundary. Whatever my mother did next, this was our side of it. By morning, an email from the caseworker waited in my inbox. Information request and safeguards. She attached scans of what my mother had handed them, a shaky power of attorney with the wrong county seal, a letter on a judge's name that didn't exist, and a typed statement saying Eli and I were recently adjudicated unfit. She confirmed the file was frozen and no placement had been opened. Please send copies of your IDs, the birth certificate, and any relevant messages, she wrote. I printed the email and felt steadier just holding paper that said the process had stopped. Eli found a family law firm that could see us at 2. We fed Mateo, packed the folder I had started, IDs, birth certificate, screenshots, a simple timeline, and drove across the river while he slept in his carrier. The office sat above a streetcar stop. The bell came and went like a reminder to stay alert. Our attorney, Alana Cho, shook our hands, smiled at Mateo, and listened without interrupting while I recapped the last 48 hours. She arranged the documents into neat stacks. "You have civil claims," she said evenly. "Defamation, interference, and a request for injunctive relief to bar further contact with agencies on your behalf. The agency and the city attorney can handle the criminal side: fraud, forgery, maybe attempted custodial interference. Your job is to keep records and keep the child safe." She slid over a checklist: preserve texts and voicemails, keep a call log, funnel all contact through counsel. "We'll file," Eli said. I heard how sure he sounded and matched it. "Yes," I said, "file." We signed a narrow engagement letter. Alana drafted a short demand that required my mother to retract her claims in writing and to cease any contact with adoption or social services concerning Mateo. She also prepared an emergency letter to the agency confirming our custody and instructing them to route any inquiry about our family through her office. Seeing our names on her letterhead was a relief I hadn't known to expect. When we got home, a voicemail from the city attorney's investigator was waiting. She asked for a brief statement the next day and warned she might need screenshots and a copy of the forged forms. Her tone was careful and calm. I called back, confirmed a time, and added the appointment to our fridge calendar between diapers delivery and pediatrician. That evening, my mother's first apology email arrived. It was long and breathless. She was out of her mind with worry, had only wanted to protect Tessa's day, and had no idea they would overreact. Before the paragraph ended, she pivoted. "You promised your father you'd take care of me. How is this care?" I read it twice, saved it to the folder, and did not reply. An hour later, she wrote again, this time listing her current restrictions: no travel, daily check-ins, an ankle monitor that was humiliating. "If you tell them it was a misunderstanding, they'll show mercy," she wrote. "Think of family." I opened a new message and kept it to 2 lines. All communication should go through our attorney, Alana Cho. Contact attached. "We won't discuss the case directly." I sent it, then blocked her number on my phone and left email open for the record. Min and Howard stopped by with dinner. We told them the short version. There was an incident, the agency stopped it, we were working with counsel. Min held Mateo and said, "You're doing the right thing," in the same voice she uses when she fixes a swaddle without making me feel clumsy. Howard checked the front lock and asked if we wanted him to add a camera. We said yes. After they left, Eli set up a shared drive for evidence and labeled the folders by date. I wrote a clean timeline from the day of Tessa's engagement to the call from the caseworker and tucked the printed copy into our binder. It felt like housework. Ordinary steps that, done in order, keep the place livable. Before bed, I stood by Mateo's crib and watched his breath even out. I thought about my father, about the promise I made with a hand in mine, and about what keeping that promise looks like when the person you're protecting from harm is also the one who caused it. Care, I decided, could include distance. It could include a lawyer's letter and a closed door. I turned off the lamp and felt the choice settle. The investigator called at 9 and took my statement over a secure link. I sat at the table with Mateo sleeping beside me and read from the timeline I had written the night before. She asked for dates, exact phrases from my mother's texts, and copies of the forged forms. Her questions were careful and neutral. When we finished, she thanked me and said they would be in touch after the city attorney reviewed the file. I hung up and felt something simple: the relief of doing the next right task. By noon, our civil complaint had been served. Alana forwarded the confirmation and, a beat later, an email from my mother's attorney asking for an early conversation toward joint resolution. Alana wrote back that we were open to a short call to set ground rules, then proposed mediation for the following week. "We set the frame," she said to us on speaker. "No triaging feelings. No side conversations. One agenda: safety of the child and cessation of interference." Before the day ended, my uncle called. I let it go to voicemail, listened, and then called back so I could choose my words. He didn't waste time. "Your mother raised you," he said. "This public mess is shameful. Withdraw the suit and stop embarrassing the family." "She wasn't embarrassed when she tried to place my son for adoption," I said. "We're keeping Mateo safe and telling the truth." "That's it. She made one mistake," he snapped. "Fix it." "It wasn't a mistake," I said. "It was a plan." He started listing favors and holidays from years ago, as if hospitality were a ledger I was failing to balance. I told him all communication should go through our attorney and ended the call. I saved the voicemail to the folder. That night, Tessa texted for the first time since the baby was born. "You're doing this because you hate me," she wrote. "Mom is devastated. All anyone talks about now is your drama." I stared at the screen and decided not to explain law or boundaries to someone who had never asked how labor went. I replied with 2 sentences. "The agency stopped a fraudulent adoption. We're working with counsel." She sent back an eye roll emoji and a line about attention. I muted the thread and went to check on Mateo. Mediation happened on a Wednesday in a bland room with a wall clock that clicked too loudly. The mediator, a calm woman with a tidy stack of tissues at the center of the table, opened with the process. Alana laid out our terms in plain language. My mother would retract her false statements in writing, cease any contact with agencies or schools or medical offices about Mateo, agree to a no-contact order regarding placement or custody, and reimburse documented costs we had incurred because of her actions. No one raised their voice. We left space for my mother to speak. She didn't apologize. She started to cry in the loud way that turns each word into a spectacle. She said I had always resented Tessa, that I was punishing her for being proud of her youngest, that I was using the courts to get back at a family that gave me everything. The mediator asked her to lower her voice and to answer the proposal. My mother said she would not sign anything that made her look guilty, and that if I had decency, I would withdraw this entire charade before the rehearsal dinner. Alana asked for a short break. In the hallway, she said, "We'll end this session if it stays performative. We already have what we need on the criminal side. The civil terms are to protect you going forward." I nodded and drank water I didn't want. When we returned, my mother's attorney tried a different tactic: narrow the conversation to money and misunderstandings. Alana kept the frame. "This is about conduct," she said. "It will not happen again. There will be a written retraction and a bar on third-party contact." The mediator asked my mother directly whether she could agree to stop contacting agencies about my child. My mother crossed her arms and said she would do what is best for her family. The session ended. In the car, I watched Eli adjust the rearview mirror. He didn't speak until we had crossed the river. "We tried," he said. "We did." I nodded and felt the truth of it settle without drama. At home, I fed Mateo, then opened the shared drive and added the mediator's summary to our binder. Word traveled fast. A cousin I hadn't seen in years messaged me to ask if I was really suing my own mother. I answered with one line about false paperwork and an agency that stopped it. A few replies were kind. Most were unhelpful advice dressed as concern. I learned to end the threads early. "We're handling it with counsel," I wrote, and archived the conversations. That evening, Min brought over dumplings and asked if we wanted company. We ate at the table with Mateo in a sling across my chest. Min said, "When you name a boundary, someone will call it unkind." Keep it anyway. I didn't realize I needed someone older to say that out loud until she did. Before bed, Alana called with 2 updates. The investigator had requested a formal interview next week. The city attorney was preparing charges and might reach out to me again. And my mother's attorney had hinted at public statements from Tessa about being victimized by my timing. "Ignore the noise," Alana said. "We answer process with process." After I hung up, I stood over Mateo's crib and listened to his slow breath. The day had been full of loud clocks and high voices. Here was the quiet task I could do well. Keep the record, keep the door locked, keep the lights low when he woke. The rest would move forward whether or not I watched it every minute. I turned off the lamp and, for the first time in days, slept through the first half of the night. The second mediation was set for Tuesday. I fed Mateo, packed extra milk, and told myself to expect nothing. My mother arrived with a different posture, hands folded, jaw set, her attorney speaking first. The mediator reviewed the ground rules. Alana restated our terms. A written retraction of her false claims, a promise to stop contacting any agency, school, or medical office about Mateo, reimbursement of documented costs, and a simple no-contact clause regarding placement or custody. For 10 minutes, my mother stared at the table and let her lawyer talk. Then she lifted her head and asked if we would at least admit that announcing a baby the year of a wedding was provocative. Alana didn't take the bait. "This is about conduct," she said. "Will your client sign the retraction and cease contact agreement?" The room tightened. My mother's voice rose. She said I had always been jealous of Tessa, that Eli was manipulating me, that the agency clerk had twisted her words. The mediator reminded her to lower her voice. My mother pushed back her chair hard enough to bark the floor and declared she would not confess to crimes in writing to make me feel powerful. The mediator ended the session. We stood, gathered our papers, and left without ceremony. Word moved faster than we did. By late afternoon, a cousin sent me screenshots from Tessa's Instagram stories. A block of text about a sister who times her drama to steal joy, a vague claim about false accusations, and a promise that nothing will ruin this wedding. I didn't engage. I saved the screenshots to our folder and put my phone face down. At 7, while Eli rinsed bottles, someone pounded on our door. The camera Min and Howard installed sent a notification. On the screen, Tessa, eyes bright, jaw set. I didn't open. "Nora, answer," she shouted. "You're destroying Mom." You know she promised to help with the venue. Now everything's on me because you want attention. I told her through the door to leave. She kept going, voice carrying down the hall. "You weren't invited because you make everything about you. Look at you now. Lawyers, complaints. Do you feel big?" I said, clearly, that I would call the police if she didn't go. She took a step closer to the peephole and said 3 things I won't repeat. Eli was already on with dispatch. Mateo startled in the bedroom. I picked him up and kept my tone even. A neighbor's door opened, then closed. 2 officers arrived within minutes. They asked Tessa to step back from the door, took our IDs through the chain, and listened while I explained that we had an open civil case and an active criminal investigation, that we had asked family to contact us through counsel, and that Tessa had shown up uninvited and refused to leave. The taller officer looked at the camera above the door and asked if it recorded audio. Eli said yes. They asked Tessa if she intended to return. She said she had every right to talk to her sister. They told her she did not have the right to harass us at home and issued a trespass warning for the building. One officer turned to me and said quietly, "You might consider a restraining order if this continues." After they walked her out, the hallway fell back into its usual quiet. I sat on the couch, Mateo tucked against my shoulder, and felt the shaking in my hands catch up to me. Eli brought water, then opened the laptop. We saved the camera clip, the dispatch log, and the police card with the incident number. I emailed everything to Alana with a short subject line. "Tessa at our door. Police called." Alana called within the hour. "You did the right thing," she said. "Document, don't debate." She explained the process for a restraining order, what incidents count, how long it lasts, and what it covers. "We can file as early as tomorrow," she added. "The judge may grant a temporary order the same day." I asked if this would make things worse. "It will make them clearer," she said. "Clarity can look like escalation to people who are used to you bending. Keep your routine. Let me handle the noise." I texted Min to let her know we were safe. She replied with a simple heart, and a minute later, a photo of dumplings lined on a tray, ready to steam. I breathed in, breathed out, and felt my pulse come down. Then I wrote one more note for the timeline. Second mediation ended. Tessa came to door. Police issued trespass warning. Counsel recommends RO. I printed the page and slid it into the binder. Before bed, I stood over Mateo's crib and watched his steady breath. The day had been full of loud rooms and charged words, but this was quiet, and it was mine to protect. I locked the door, checked the camera feed, and turned off the light. The boundary had held. Tomorrow we would make it law. We filed the restraining order the next morning at the Multnomah County Courthouse. Alana met us on the 4th floor with a neat stack of forms and a list of what the judge would want to see. I wrote my declaration in plain sentences: the late-night pounding, the threats through the door, the police response, the incident number, and the video clip from our camera. Eli signed his own statement as a witness. We attached screenshots from Tessa's posts and the mediator's summary from the day before. It felt less like drama and more like paperwork that kept a door shut. The hearing was brief. The judge read quietly, asked whether Tessa had any reason to visit our home and whether we shared childcare or property. "No," I said. He nodded once. "Temporary order granted," he said. He set the distance at 100 yards from our apartment and from Eli's office, barred direct or third-party contact, and restricted any communication about Mateo's placement or custody. "Service today," he added, signing the page. I exhaled in a way I hadn't realized I was holding. By afternoon, the sheriff's civil unit confirmed service. 10 minutes later, Tessa's Instagram story went dark. Then a new post appeared. A general statement about being silenced by lies. I didn't answer. I saved it. Alana sent a short note. RO in effect. If she contacts you, call 911, then me. My mother's attorney reached out again proposing mutual de-escalation. Alana replied that de-escalation looked like a written retraction, a promise to stop contacting agencies, and reimbursement of our costs. "If your client signs those today," she wrote, "we can discuss a narrow visitation plan in the future at Nora's discretion." There was no reply. Bills began to arrive. Hospital co-pays, the car seat, legal retainers. Eli opened a spreadsheet and put the numbers in one column, our savings in another. "We can manage," he said, not as a slogan, but as math. Min and Howard offered to cover anything urgent. We thanked them and said we'd ask if the balance tipped. Every evening, after the dishes, Eli updated the sheet and I updated the timeline. It was ordinary work that made the bigger work possible. We filed the restraining order the next morning at the Multnomah County Courthouse. Alana met us on the 4th floor with a neat stack of forms and a list of what the judge would want to see. I wrote my declaration in plain sentences: the late-night pounding, the threats through the door, the police response, the incident number, and the video clip from our camera. Eli signed his own statement as a witness. We attached screenshots from Tessa's posts and the mediator's summary from the day before. It felt less like drama and more like paperwork that kept a door shut. The hearing was brief. The judge read quietly, asked whether Tessa had any reason to visit our home and whether we shared childcare or property. "No," I said. He nodded once. "Temporary order granted," he said. He set the distance at 100 yards from our apartment and from Eli's office, barred direct or third-party contact, and restricted any communication about Mateo's placement or custody. "Service today," he added, signing the page. I exhaled in a way I hadn't realized I was holding. By afternoon, the sheriff's civil unit confirmed service. 10 minutes later, Tessa's Instagram story went dark. Then a new post appeared, a general statement about being silenced by lies. I didn't answer. I saved it. Alana sent a short note. RO in effect. If she contacts you, call 911, then me. My mother's attorney reached out again proposing mutual de-escalation. Alana replied that de-escalation looked like a written retraction, a promise to stop contacting agencies, and reimbursement of our costs. "If your client signs those today," she wrote, "we can discuss a narrow visitation plan in the future at Nora's discretion." There was no reply. Bills began to arrive. Hospital co-pays, the car seat, legal retainers. Eli opened a spreadsheet and put the numbers in one column, our savings in another. "We can manage," he said, not as a slogan, but as math. Min and Howard offered to cover anything urgent. We thanked them and said we'd ask if the balance tipped. Every evening, after the dishes, Eli updated the sheet and I updated the timeline. It was ordinary work that made the bigger work possible. 2 days later, the city attorney scheduled formal interviews. Mine was set for Monday at 10, Eli's at 11. Alana would sit in. We arranged for Min to watch Mateo in our apartment so he could nap in his own crib. The night before, I printed my declaration one more time and highlighted the parts that matched the agency's email. I slept better than I expected. The interview room was small and practical. A table, a recorder, a pitcher of water. The investigator asked me to start at the first contact with the agency and move forward in order. I did. When she asked how my mother learned about Mateo's birth, I said group text and let the silence sit. She noted the restraining order and the mediation attempts, then asked if I had any safety concerns for the next month. "Only that line stay clear," I said. "We're trying to keep our routine." When we got home, an email from the agency waited. They had closed the file and flagged our names to prevent any new inquiry about placement by a third party. It was one sentence and a case number. I printed it and slipped it into the binder. Small pages, big relief. That evening, my uncle called again from a different number. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message about family shame and airing dirty laundry. I saved it, wrote down the call time, and did not call back. A cousin texted to say Tessa had hinted that the wedding might be postponed because of the stress. I saved that too and turned off my phone for the night. After we put Mateo down, Eli and I sat on the floor beside the crib. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge. "What's next?" he asked. "We wait for charges," I said, "and we keep our days simple." He nodded. We checked the door lock, the camera feed, and the binder on the shelf. I stood for a long moment and watched Mateo breathe. The order was on paper now. The boundary had a number and a signature. Our job was to keep the rest of the noise from crossing it. A week after the interviews, Alana called with 2 threads moving in parallel. First, the city attorney had formally opened a case. They would decide on charges once they finished collecting statements from the agency staff. Second, my mother's attorney had asked to return to mediation, with a view toward concrete terms. Alana said we would go, but only to sign what we had already proposed. This time the room was quieter. My mother didn't perform. She kept her hands in her lap and let her lawyer speak. The mediator went down the list one item at a time. Written retraction of the false claims? Yes. No contact of any kind with agencies, schools, or medical offices regarding Mateo? Yes. Agreement not to pursue or discuss placement or custody with any third party? Yes. Reimbursement of documented expenses, disputed at first, then accepted after Alana slid a folder across the table with receipts and timestamps. We'd like this resolved today, she said. An hour later, we had signatures. There was no apology, but there was a document. I took the signed copy in both hands and felt the room return to its actual size. On the way home, Eli suggested we drive past the river before cutting back to our street. Mateo slept. The water moved the same way it always does. At home, Min was holding a bottle and humming. "How did it go?" she asked. "It's signed," I said. She exhaled like she had been holding her breath for me. We ate takeout at the table and, for once, didn't talk about lawyers. The next morning, Alana wired us the first reimbursement transfer and said the remainder would follow once the bank released a hold. "Set it aside," she advised. "Let it do something useful for your family." Eli opened the savings account we had planned for Mateo and moved the money without ceremony. We kept our regular budget and left the rest alone. We needed a small change of air, so that weekend we drove to Salem to see Eli's grandparents. They sat us on the couch and passed Mateo back and forth, as if he were made of something that warmed the hands. When I told them the short version of what had happened, Eli's grandmother patted my knee and said, "Protecting your child is not a betrayal of your parent." I hadn't known I needed someone else to say that until she did. On the drive back, I felt the knot in my chest sit lower. Back in Portland, the practical work continued. My mother's retraction letter arrived through Alana's office. 2 short paragraphs acknowledging that her statements to the agency were false and that she had no authority to act on our behalf. Alana filed it with the civil clerk and forwarded a copy to the city attorney's investigator. "This doesn't end the criminal matter," she said, "but it helps." We added the letter to the binder and scanned it to the drive. Tessa stayed quiet. The restraining order held. A few relatives tried new angles. Maybe you could forgive privately. Maybe a statement would help the wedding. And I answered them all the same way. We're handling it with counsel. Some stopped asking. A few pushed until I stopped answering. The apartment felt calmer when my phone stopped buzzing every hour. With the civil piece close to done, Alana asked whether we wanted to pursue a narrow visitation plan for the future, something supervised and scheduled if my mother requested it later. I told her we weren't ready to decide. "That's fine," she said. "A boundary is allowed to be undecided. You don't owe an answer by a date on a calendar." I wrote that sentence on a sticky note and put it on the inside cover of the binder. One evening, after Mateo finally gave us 5 straight hours, Eli and I walked the block with coffee cups and no plan. The sky was clear. The street smelled like cut grass. "What would feel normal to you right now?" he asked. Laundry that finishes on the first try, I said, and we both laughed harder than the joke required. Normal wasn't going to arrive all at once. It would come in pieces. A quiet phone, a clean line on a page, a baby sleeping through the second half of the night. Monday brought one more email from the city attorney. They had enough to file. They would keep us updated on dates, and they thanked us for our cooperation. I read the message twice and felt that same simple relief as the first day the caseworker said, "File frozen." It wasn't victory. It was progress, and it was measured. I closed the laptop, lifted Mateo from his playmat, and told him we were going to fold the laundry and listen to the dryer hum. The rest could move on its own for an hour. The city attorney filed charges 2 weeks later. We received a formal notice with the case number and a short description: fraud, forgery, and attempted custodial interference. Alana reviewed it, circled the hearing date, and told us to plan for testimony even if the case resolved with a plea. "We prepare for the longest version," she said. "If it ends sooner, good." Court felt smaller than I expected. A wood-paneled room, a low hum from the air vent, a wall clock that made each minute sound heavier than it was. I sat behind the rail with Eli, our file in my lap. My mother entered with her attorney and kept her eyes on the floor. Tessa wasn't there. 2 agency employees took seats near the aisle and nodded once when they recognized me. The judge confirmed names and charges, then asked about counsel. The prosecutor summarized the file. A relative who presented false papers to an adoption agency, claimed authority she did not have, and attempted to start a placement without parental consent. She emphasized that no child was placed and that the agency froze the file immediately. She also noted the civil retraction my mother had signed. "We are open to resolving this without incarceration," she said, "provided there is accountability and restitution." My mother's attorney asked for time to discuss a plea. The judge set a date for the following week and released us. Outside the building, I realized I had been breathing shallowly. Eli handed me water and didn't say anything until we reached the car. "We show up again next week," he said. "That's all we have to do." We did. On the next date, my mother entered a plea without drama. Guilty on the fraud and forgery charges, no contest on attempted custodial interference. Her attorney asked for community service and treatment in lieu of jail. The prosecutor asked for fines, restitution to the agency, and a no-contact order related to any placement services. The judge scheduled a brief sentencing hearing and allowed victim statements. I spoke for 5 minutes. I used my notes and kept to the facts. The phone call, the forged forms, the agency's quick stop, the days we spent securing our home and our records. I said I was not asking the court to solve my family. I was asking it to make clear that trying to remove a child from his parents with lies carries consequences. My voice shook once. I finished and sat down. Eli squeezed my hand. Sentencing came a week later. The judge read from the bench in a steady tone. First-time offender, acceptance of responsibility through a plea, and a clear retraction in the civil case. Then the order: fines, restitution to the agency and to us for documented costs, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory mental health treatment through a court program. He adopted the prosecutor's no-contact terms with placement and social services. Any attempt to reopen these issues through third parties will be considered a violation, he said, looking directly at my mother. "Do you understand?" She nodded without raising her eyes. It was not a dramatic ending. There were no gasps, no shouting. Papers were signed. A clerk handed me a copy of the order with a stamp in the corner. Alana said, "This is a clean result," and told us how the payments would arrive. We thanked the prosecutor for handling the case without spectacle. She said, "You did the hard part by documenting everything," and shook my hand. Outside, the sky was overcast in the unremarkable way of most days here. We drove home the long route along the river. Min was at our apartment with Mateo, reading from a picture book in a low voice. "How did it go?" she asked. "It's done," I said. "There's no jail, but there are terms, and they're firm." She nodded like she approved of firm. That night, I added the sentencing order to our binder and updated the spreadsheet with the restitution schedule. Eli set a reminder to check the payments at the end of each month. We didn't celebrate. We washed bottles, folded laundry, and took turns with the late feeding. When the apartment was quiet, I stood by Mateo's crib and listened to him breathe. I thought about my father and the promise I made. Keeping it now meant distance, a paper trail, and a steady refusal to lie. It was not warm, but it was honest, and it kept our son where he belonged. After sentencing, the noise ebbed. The phone stopped filling with opinions. The agency closed the file and flagged our names. The restraining order stayed in place. For the first time in months, a week passed with no new task except the ones inside our apartment. Feed the baby, wash the bottles, sleep when we could. It felt like a return to ordinary life. Not because anything was erased, but because the next steps were simple and ours. We decided on a few practical changes. Eli changed our numbers and updated the tenant directory. We added a second deadbolt and kept the camera. I made a new folder in the shared drive called Closed and moved the case documents there, leaving only the order and the retraction letter at the top. The binder stayed on the shelf within reach, but no longer on the table. It looked like what it was now, a record, not a weapon. Money from restitution landed in small scheduled transfers. We didn't touch it. Eli moved each deposit to Mateo's savings the day it arrived and checked the statement once a month. We kept our ordinary budget, cooked at home, and said yes to help when Min and Howard offered it. Min came over on Wednesday afternoons so I could nap or shower without rushing. Howard replaced the batteries in the smoke alarms and showed Eli how to rethread the stroller straps after a wash. These were the pieces that made the rest of it feel possible. Tessa kept her distance. There were still a few vague posts about choosing joy, but no more pounding on our door, no more phone calls from unknown numbers. My mother's lawyer sent proof of her enrollment in the court-ordered program and a schedule for community service hours. I didn't answer, but I saved the attachments. When my mother wrote once to ask for pictures, Alana replied on our behalf and said we weren't ready. That was true. A boundary can be undecided. It can also be firm for a long time. We thought about moving and decided to wait. The apartment fit us for now. The street felt familiar, the neighbors kind, and the pediatrician was 3 blocks away. Stability mattered more than a fresh address. What we needed most was time to let normal return at a speed we could handle. Little by little, it did. Mateo learned to track the ceiling fan with his eyes. Eli learned to make dinner with one hand. I learned the fast diaper change that kept him half asleep. On Saturdays, we walked down to the bakery and split a cinnamon roll on the bench outside. People passed with their own lists and their own quiet problems. It helped to remember that most lives look like this. Small tasks done well, one after another. On a Sunday evening, while Mateo slept on Eli's chest, I opened the binder and read the first page of my timeline, the one that begins with Tessa's engagement and the soup on the stove. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. My father asked me to take care of my mother. I kept that promise as far as I could, without breaking the ones I owe my son and myself. Care, for us, turned out to be steady truth, clean records, and a door that stays locked when it should. Before bed, I stood by the crib and listened for the easy rhythm of Mateo's breath. I told him, quietly, that his parents know how to keep him safe. I put the binder back on the shelf and turned off the lamp. The house was quiet, and it was ours,